Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Today we are from Group 2 and we are going to present our group assignment for ECO120 course, Principles of Economics. The topic that we have chosen for our group assignment is inflation. Our team members includes Nuri Nadira binti Hashim, Norfatini Wafika binti Muhammad Azlan, Hamidah Atirah binti Rosli, and last but not least, Nur Kumaira binti Muhammad Firgaus. Could you guess which country will our group choose? I will give you some hint. It is our beloved and favorite country in this whole world. Yes, the country that we have chosen is our own country, Malaysia. Malaysia is one of the biggest Southeast Asia countries that have a lump of 32.96 million people living in the country. Malaysia is a country that made up by two major landmasses separated by water, with Peninsular Malaysia on the west and East Malaysia on the east of the country. Malaysia is divided into 13 states and 3 federal territories. 11 states and 2 federal territories are located at the Peninsular Malaysia, while the remaining 2 states and 1 federal territory could be found at the East Malaysia. There are also 1,056 meters of Johor-Singapore Causeway that connects Malaysia and Singapore across the Straits of Johor. Kuala Lumpur is the capital city in Malaysia, while Federal Territory of Putrajaya as the administrative capital and judicial capital of Malaysia. The geographical of Malaysia includes Mount Kinabalu in Sabah as the highest point in Malaysia, while Indian Ocean as the lowest point. We also have Rajang River in Sarawak as the longest river in Malaysia. There are also largest lake in Malaysia and classified as 2 types of lake, whether it is artificial or natural lake. The largest artificial lake is Kernial Lake in Terengganu, while the largest natural lake is Bera Lake in Pahang. The administration sector of Malaysia is managed by the Government of Malaysia, or officially called as the Federal Government of Malaysia, which is based in the Federal Territory of Putrajaya, except for the legislative branch that is located in the capital city of Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. The administration sector of Malaysia is being led by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Yang Amat Berhormat Ismail Sabri Yaakob, a member of a parliament that was being appointed by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong Al-Sultan Abdullah Riadatun Al-Mustafa Billah Shah Ibni Al-Mahum Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Al-Mustain Billah. The administration in Malaysia has many different sectors, such as education, registration, finance, transportation, and more, and was led by a minister from the cabinet that was being appointed by the Prime Minister with the help of 1.71 million civil servants. The economic sector in Malaysia is the 4th largest in Southeast Asia and the 38th largest in the world according to the International Monetary Fund. With the help from a high density of knowledge-based industries and adoption of cutting-edge technology for manufacturing and digital economy, the labor productivity in Malaysia is significantly higher than neighboring countries such as Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Malaysia annual inflation rate as in December 2021 was at 3.2%. The most important category in the consumer price index are food and non-alcoholic beverages, 30%. Next, the percentage that contributes into the total weight of inflation rate in Malaysia are housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels 23%, transport 15%, communication 6%, recreation and culture 5%, furnishing and household equipment and routine household maintenance 4%, restaurant and hotels 3.2%, and lastly, miscellaneous goods and services 6.3%. But a year before the 3.2% of inflation rate in Malaysia, the inflation rate for Consumer Price Index (CPI) in Malaysia as in 2020 was negative 1.1%. The inflation rate in Malaysia hit a negative value, or we call it as deflation, and it was caused by the uprising COVID-19 cases in this country. Deflation or negative inflation happened due to decreasing demand for goods when the supply for the goods increased. For example, when the government imposed a movement control order, MCO, that caused many citizens to lose their job and they could not afford anymore to buy goods other than their daily necessities. Malaysia has only seen two-digit inflation a few times, although the inflation rate has been higher than GDP a few times. In recent years, GDP growth is always exceeding the inflation rate due to the expansionary economic and favorable investment policies. COVID-19 also affected the global GDP growth, and Malaysia was no exception. In 2021, the government lifted one-by-one restriction to lift the citizen burden. The inflation rate in 2021 in Malaysia is greater than 2020, as it became a positive inflation when almost every sector in Malaysia could operate normally if they follow the standard operation procedure (SOP) from the government. A 3.2% of inflation rate in Malaysia is still considered in a healthy economy, but when the inflation rate in Malaysia soared to the higher value or declining until negative inflation, the country should take preventive measure and strategy to keep up the economic situation at a good level.
Inflation is the decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time. A quantitative estimate of the rate at which the decline in purchasing power occurs can be reflected in the increase of an average price level of a basket of selected goods and services in an economy over some period of time. The rise in the general level of prices, often expressed as a percentage, means that a unit of currency effectively buys less than it did in prior periods. There are a few causes of inflation. The first one is demand pull effect. Demand pull effect is increases demand and leads to price rises. How did that happen? Is demand pull inflation occurs when an increase in the supply of money and credit stimulates overall demand for goods and services in an economy to increase more rapidly than the economy's production capacity. The easiest example to understand is the reduction in gasoline production. When gasoline producing countries decide to reduce gasoline production, this causes the supply to petrol to decrease. This will lead to an increase in demand, which will be reflected in rising prices and contributing to inflation. Second causes is cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is the increase of the prices when the cost of wages and materials goes up. Examples is the increase in the price of labor to produce a good or to provide a service, or the increase in the price of raw materials. If the wage rate rises sharply, then cost of production will increase. Last one is built-in inflation. When the prices of goods and services rise, workers and others expect that their cost of living will be higher and continue to rise in the future. Therefore, they will ask for higher payments of salary to cover their living expenses. Their wage increases result in higher costs of goods and services, and this wage price spiral continues when one factor drives another and vice versa.
So why is it so hard to control inflation? There are many factors that can cause the hardness of controlling inflation. So the first is will and politics. It will be one of the reasons why it will be so difficult, because it is the starting of the Fed's problems on the fiscal policy constraints. The question that should be asked is, the Fed going to act in time, or will it continue to view any rise in inflation as transitory and blame it on which month has the sharpest price increase, like they did back in the 1970s? It is not simple for the Fed to create an economic decline and to commit with the policy through distress and pain. It is also not easy for the government to support the central bank in such a protracted struggle. However, permitting a sustained rise sustained rise in unemployment, which usually focus on this disadvantage, is seen as burdensome in today's political climate. In view of the fact that the Fed's interpretation of pursuing maximum employment is inequality and inequity. Furthermore, the ongoing recession has a chance of becoming more severe. In conclusion, inflation could be stabilized with little economic decline if people actually put faith in the policy. Secondly, the Fed believes that the consumer price inflation is related with unemployment rate, which is known as the Phillips curve. Its analysis is based on the assumption that inflation results from a low unemployment rate and deflation works in the opposite way, which is from high unemployment. However, this logic is both oversimple and superficially plausible. In fact, it is common in history for rising unemployment to correlate with higher inflation rate and a lower unemployment rate correlated with low inflation rates. And the last point would be monetary policy lives in the shadow of debt. In 1980, Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker began raising interest rates to curb inflation because the US national debt was about 25% of GDP. Today, it is at 100% of GDP and the percentage is rising rapidly and endlessly. When the Fed raises interest rates by 1 percentage point, it also raises the interest cost on by 1 percentage point. This means with debt at 100% of GDP, 100% of GDP equals to $227 billion. So, a 7.5% interest rate imposes an interest cost equal to 7.5% of GDP, or $1.7 trillion. In conclusion, higher interest rates can only lower inflation if they are accompanied by credible and sustained fiscal tightening. Absence of fiscal tightening will make interest rates higher, thus making inflation fail to contain. Should the aim of the government be to attain low inflation? So, achieving low or high inflation could be beneficial for either parties. Having low inflation could make the price of market go lower and number of consumers will increase. Meanwhile, high inflation will help companies to attain more profit. However, which one should be the aim for the government? Keeping the inflation low or high? So, the government's objective should be on attaining low inflation. This is also an advice from almost all economists. Maintaining low inflation keeps the economy stable as it could ensure investment, saving, and economic growth. The average inflation rate by governments is around 2%. This rate has been proven to be the best between keeping away from costs on inflation and costs of deflation. Keeping inflation low brings many benefits. Firstly, companies will be more helpful to invest and it could lead to higher growth rates in the future and an increase in production capacity. If inflation rises because monetary policy is not sufficiently strict or careful, there could be an economic boom. However, if this economic growth is above long-term trend growth rate, it is likely to be unsustainable and the boom will be followed by the bust, which is also called recession. This happened in the UK in 1991 after the loss and boom of the late 1980s. Maintaining low inflation therefore helps to avoid cyclical swings in the economy, which can lead to negative growth and unemployment. UK goods will no longer be competitive if inflation in the UK is higher than elsewhere, thus leading to a decline in exports and likely to worsen the current account. Low inflation and low production costs allow a country to remain competitive. This will strengthen exports and competitiveness in the long run. Many costs are the cost of changing price lists for high inflation costs. When inflation is low, the cost of changing price lists and shopping around can be minimized to the lowest prices.
So what can cause the sustained increase in the rate of inflation? The sustained increase in the rate of inflation are caused by the urge from customers to spend and invest in facing inflation tends to boost inflation. Then, it can create a potential in catastrophic feedback loop. As for people and businesses, expands more quickly to reduce the time that the depreciating currency, the economy will find itself awash in the cash that no one particularly wants. In addition, the supply of money outstrips the demand, and the price of money during the purchasing power of currency will fall into an ever faster rate. Unfortunately, when things get really bad, the owner must have a sensible tendency to keep the business and the household supplies stocked rather than sitting on cash devolved into hoarding, and this can lead to empty grocery store shelves. People can become desperate to offload currency, and everyday payday will turn into a frenzy spending of anything as long as it's not ever more worthless money.
What is hyperinflation? Hyperinflation is when the prices of goods and services rise more than 50% per month. The severity of cost increase distinguish it from the other types of inflation. The net worth galloping inflation sends prices up 10% or more a year. Example, at that rate, a loaf of bread could cost one amount in the morning and a higher one in the evening. Hyperinflation sees a rapid and continuing increase in nominal prices, not like low inflation, because low inflation is the process of the rising prices is protected and not generally noticeable. Hyperinflation stems from a loss of confidence in the national currency, such as the ability to the central bank to maintain the value of the currency, because price increases that can be caused by rapid money creation that create a vicious circle. It requires an increasing amount of new money creations to finance the government deficit. The people can also lose confidence if the government is not managed well. For example, people begin collecting valuables to avoid paying higher prices for tomorrow due to hyperinflation. Individuals usually start investing in durable goods such as washing machine, jewelry, and others. Worse, hyperinflation will cause the domestic economy to shift to a border economy. Therefore, it can also destroy the financial system because banks no longer want to lend money to the people. Thank you.
As for the conclusion, inflation rate in a country, specifically Malaysia, is very important, as the inflation rate is the determinant of the healthiness in the country economic situation. Inflation also reduces the purchasing power, reduce the value of domestic currency, and make the economy unstable. A country with bad economy will make their citizens suffer from the side effects such as losing homes, losing income, and even losing their own necessary to survive in life. The government should always be in their toes to make sure the inflation rate in Malaysia is always in good condition, as there was someone that was chosen by the vote of the citizens through selection. It is to supply more employment opportunities for the citizens of Malaysia. More employment opportunities help to increase the labor as well as the level of production and decrease the buying power to raise the cost of goods for customers. As a result, an acceptable amount of inflation must be determined to sustain policy making. Keeping Malaysia's inflation rate below the threshold is very important, as it allows the economy to be flourished to its full potential. That's all from us. Thank you.